Hey guys, welcome to your next PHP front to back video. In this video we're going to take a look at filters and validation in PHP. Okay, now this is the last video before we actually do a small project. In the next video we're going to do a contact form, which is very simple, but it's going to include pretty much all of the stuff that we've dealt with up to this point. So I think it's a good little project. Now filters are used to validate, check data types, and we can also sanitize with filters. For instance, if we want an email address to be formatted and we don't want any characters that aren't supposed to be in an email address, we can use a filter for that. Okay, so what I'm going to do here first is just grab a form, an HTML form, and I'm going to paste that in. Okay, we should probably create the file first. So let's call this filters.php. That's the wrong place. Let's see, PHP sandbox. Alright, so let me paste in this form. Very simple. I don't know if I've showed you guys this, but for the action I'm using echo out server, the server super global, and PHP self, which is just going to give us the current page. You could just as well put filters.php in here, but this is a neater way because even if you change the name of the file, this will still work. Alright, so that's all that is. Now the first function that we're going to look at is filter has var, and what that does is it can check for post or get values. Alright, so when we submit the form, instead of saying if is set post data, we can use this filter. So let's put in a comment and we'll say check for posted data, and we're going to put an if statement or an if else. Okay, and let's put in here if filter has var, and we want to put in input underscore post for the first parameter. Okay, now if this was method equals get, then you would put input underscore get, and then the second value is going to be the input field. So in this case we have the name data, so that's what we're going to put here. Okay, and then let's just say echo. So if this is true, we'll just say data found, and if it's not, then we'll echo out no data. So let's save that, and then we'll go to localhost/php. I almost put PHP my admin. PHP sandbox, and what do I call this? Filters.php. So we get no data right away because obviously we haven't posted that value, so it's not finding it. But if we put something in here and submit, you'll see we get data found. Alright, so it's just a way to test for a certain post or get value. Alright, now if I change this to get, and if we go and reload and submit the form, actually let's submit the form, we get no data because we're using method get and it's looking for post data. If we change this to get and we enter something in, we get data found. Okay, and we're going to get data found if that value is in the URL. Alright, so I'm just going to make that back to post. So we can also validate input data as well with a function called filter input. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this, and let's put that here. You can get rid of that. And what we're going to do is check for data. Okay, check to make sure that this is submitted, and then we want to validate it as an email address. So for that, we're going to put an if statement in here, and we're going to say if filter underscore input, and we want input underscore post, and then the field name, which is data, and then we want the validation, which is going to be an email address. So we say filter underscore validate email, and that shouldn't have a quote. Okay, and then in here let's do echo. So if it validates, then we're going to say email is valid, and then we'll do an else, and we'll echo email is not valid. So let's say, actually, let's comment this out up here. And we'll save that. And let's just refresh this completely. And let's submit just anything, and we get email is not valid. If we submit test@test.com, we get email is valid. So this is a much easier and cleaner way for checking for an email than using something like some crazy regular expression. Now, in addition to these validates, and there's a lot of these, I'll paste them in a few minutes, but we can also sanitize data. So if we want an email address and we want to remove any characters in it that don't belong in an email address, we can do that. So what I'll do is keep this, and then, let's see, we're going to take the value that's in post data and put it into a variable called email. All right, so we'll say post and data. And if you haven't watched I think it was part 8, I'm not sure what part it was, but the one where we talk about get and post, if you haven't watched that yet, I'd suggest doing that. All right, so we're putting it in this value called email, or this variable called email, and then we want to remove illegal characters. And we can do that with filter sanitize email. And we use a function called filter var for that. So let's say email equals filter var, and in here we're going to pass in that email value, and then we want to put in our filter underscore sanitize, let me spell that, sanitize underscore email. And that'll actually strip out any characters that don't belong there. And just to show you, I'm going to echo out email. Okay, we'll do that, and we'll also concatenate a line break. Okay, so when we submit this, it should print out the clean version of the email, and then it'll also tell us if it's valid or not. So let's just refresh this, and let's put in, let's see, we'll do test, put in a couple slashes, a couple, less than, greater than, what else? We'll put some parentheses, and then we'll put an @ symbol, and then we'll do test, a couple other backslashes, forward slashes, .com. Okay, so that's a mess right there, but if I submit it, you'll see that it echoes out test@test.com. It stripped out all the stuff that shouldn't be there. Now notice that it says email is not valid. The reason for that is that when we ran this right here, it took the value that we submitted, which was the one with all the slashes and the weird stuff. So that doesn't pass this. So in this situation, we wouldn't use this. What we would do is we'd use filter var with filter validate email with this right here. So let's change this to filter var, and then we're going to just change, let's see, we're going to get rid of both of these and replace it with the email variable, which is the clean value that we sanitized. So then let's save that and reload, and now we get email is valid. Okay, we weren't testing the post value directly. We cleaned it, we sanitized it, and then we tested for it. Now what I'm going to do is paste in all the different validations we can do. So we can test for Boolean, email, float, integers, an IP address, a regular expression, and a URL. And then for the sanitize, let's paste those in as well. We have email and encoded, floats, integers, special characters, strings, and URLs. Okay, so we can basically strip out tags so that the value will pass each of these types. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to comment the rest of this out. Let's do an integer validation. So we'll have a variable, and I'll set it to 23, and then let's run it through an if, and we'll say if filter underscore var, and then we'll pass in var, and then our validation, which will be filter validate int, and then we'll echo, let's say echo var is a number, else var is not a number. Okay, so 23 is a number. Now, even if we wrap quotes around this and reload, we're going to get 23 as a number. Okay, if we put letters in here like this, reload, we get that is not a number. Okay, and you can do this with any of these validations right here. Okay, so you can test for those, and it's just a much easier way than using something like regular expressions. Now, let me give you an example for sanitizing an integer or a number. So what we can do is set number equals, and let's put a bunch of numbers and letters mixed. Okay, and that should actually be in quotes. And then what we'll do is we'll do a var dump, which we've used before, and we're going to pass in here filter underscore var, and let's pass in number. Actually, let's not call this number, let's call it var. And we're going to put filter underscore sanitize number int. Alright, so let's run that. We'll save it, reload, and now you'll see that all of the letters have been stripped out. Okay, it sanitized it into an integer. Alright, so this one here, special chars, is also very helpful. That'll prevent people from, for instance, inserting script tags into a form that outputs something on the page. So let me give you an example of that. If we were to set this to script, and in here, let's just say alert 1, something like that, and we were to echo that out, save that, reload, and that actually runs the script. And if we look in the source, you'll see it right here. Okay, well, we can use, let's see, echo filter var, and let's pass in var, and then we'll add the filter sanitize, where is it? Special characters. So let's see what happens when we do that. Oh, I'm still echoing out just the var. Let me comment that out. And then if we reload, you'll see that it's not going to fire it off. It's just going to output it on the screen. And if we were to look at the source code, it just turns them into harmless entities. Okay, so that's a really handy filter. Okay, so now what I'm going to show you is filter var array and filter input array. Now, just filter var and filter input is great if you're dealing with one field, but usually you'll have a bunch of different fields. So let's add another one here, and we'll just call this one data2. And what we can do is create an array. Let's call it filters, and we'll set this to array. And let's go in here, and let's say data. Set that to filter validate email. Okay, we'll put a comma, and then let's say data2. Let's say data2, we want it to be an int, but I also want to add some options, so we're actually going to set it to an array like that, and in here we can specify the filter we want, which is going to be filter validate int, or number int. No, that's sanitize. We want validate int. Alright, and we can actually add some options with it. So for options, that's also going to be an array. And we can set a minimum So let's say min underscore range. Actually, that needs to be in quotes. So min range, and let's set that to 1, and then we'll set a max range. Oops, a ranger. We'll set a max range of, let's say 100. Okay, so now we have this array, and it specifies the validations we want for each field and also some options. So what we're going to do with this is do a print R. And in here, let's do the filter underscore input. Filter input array. And in here, we're going to pass in input underscore post. And then we're going to apply filters. Okay, now when we submit this, if data isn't a valid email address, it's not gonna get through. All right, same thing with data 2. If it's not a number that's between 1 and 100, it's not gonna get through. So let's go ahead and try this out. We'll save it, and let's just refresh this. We have 2 inputs, and let's see what happens if we put just anything in here that's not an email address, and then something in here that's not in between 1 and 100. If we submit it, notice that data and data 2 are now, they're empty. Okay, it didn't get through. If we were to put test at test.com, and we were to put something that is in the range of 1 and 100 and submit, now they go through. Okay, so this is really good for working with multiple fields when you're working with arrays. Now we also have filter var array, okay, in addition to input array. So let's comment this out. So what I'm going to do here is create an array. We'll just call it ARR and set it to array. And let's say we have a name. And I'm just going to set this to my name, but I'm going to use all lowercase, and I'll show you why in a second. And let's say age. We'll set that to 35, and then email. We'll set that to, let's see, brad@gmail.com. All right, so we have this array, and now we're going to create, again, we're going to create a filters array. And then we want to take each of these fields and we want to apply the filters that we want. So let's say name, and let's set that. Now we could just put a filter right here, but I'm going to actually make it an array because we're going to have some other stuff with it. All right, so this will be, let's see, array, and what I'm going to apply is the filter, and we're going to set this to filter underscore callback. And then this allows us to actually apply a function to this value. So I put it in all lowercase because I'm going to use UC words, which will make every word, make the first letter capitalized. So to do that, we can say options and set that to a function, and we're going to call it UC, or we're not going to call it, we're going to use the UC words function. You could use your own custom function as well. Okay, so that's for the name. Now for the age. For age, we're going to also set that to an array. And let's see what we're going to do here. We're going to set a filter. And let's set that to filter underscore validate underscore int. Okay, so it has to be an integer. It has to be a number. And then we have options. And we'll set that to an array because we want to set a min and a max value. So let's say min range, okay, just like we did up with the input array. And we'll set that to 1 and say max range, and we'll set that to 120. Okay, so that takes care of age validation. Now we have the email. And all I want to apply here is the email filter, so we'll just say filter underscore validate email. And that's it. All right, so now we're going to do the same thing we did up top, up above. We're going to do a print R, And then here we're going to specify filter var array. And then we'll pass in our array, which is ARR, and then filters. Okay, so we'll save that. And now if we go and refresh this, you'll see that everything is there because everything is validated. Now if I were to change age to, let's say, 130 and reload, you'll see that age is not there. It's not being accepted. All right, and if this wasn't a valid email address, let's say we have 2 dots here, and we reload, that's not being accepted. Okay, and you can also see that the name has an uppercase letter for each word because we applied the UC words callback. All right, so I think that that's good enough. I mean, there's a lot more to this, but this is already getting too long for just this one subject. But there's a lot to it, so I would definitely suggest that you go to php.net and take a look at all the validation examples and the sanitize examples, because there's a lot to it, and it's really helpful when it comes to validation. All right, guys, so that's going to be it. In the next video, we're going to actually do a little project. We're going to do a contact form, and I will see you then.